Hi everyone, I'm very happy to speak to you today, and thank you for the invitation to give a couple of thoughts about the status of impact investing today, and also the story of Mirova, the management company I created a couple of years ago. Uh, Let me start maybe by coming back a little bit, by stepping back a couple of months before. Uh, I remember the beginning of the first containment in France. It was in March 2020. And at that time, we all had the feeling that something impossible had just happened. And that consequently, the world will not be able to emerge the same as it was before. At Mirova, together with a few other players, companies, asset managers, we even launched a collective initiative. We called it Recovery, through which we reflected on what the world of the future, and more specifically, the economy of the future and the company of the future could and should be. Uh, what will we keep from all the situation that we have been living during this month? We weren't the only ones thinking about what everybody called the world after, whatever that means. Meaning that after the COVID crisis, the world probably will be very different from the one it was before. I mean, this concept was very fashionable for some time, but, but the fact is that little by little, it became clear that everyone saw in the situation we were living the confirmation of the vision they had before. And therefore, they envisioned the world after as the world they had always hoped for. Uh, you know, uh, People who wanted to solve the climate crisis continue to want to solve the climate crisis, and people wanted to have less regulation, wanted again for less regulation. In other words, the COVID crisis mainly seemed to confirm everyone's pre-existing conviction. The fact is that 18 months later, the world after looks a lot like the world before, and we could say to a certain extent, only worse. The challenges we were already confronted with are still very real, and to a certain extent, only worse. For if this crisis does not seem to have brought about any profound upheaval in our way of life or our economy, it has only reinforced and strengthened the main challenges of our time. Just to quote some of them, I mean, climate change, of course, and its concomitant destruction of natural ecosystem, depletion of natural resources, biodiversity loss, general inequalities, including in particular the worsening of the precariousness of the most precarious, and gender inequalities as well. So that's the situation today. And I don't want, and I am obviously not trying to discourage this audience, which I know gathers people and organizations committed to the same goal as Mirova, which is the transformation of the economy towards a more sustainable model through investment, because we know that we need a lot of investment. So let me come to the subject of this keynote, which is from concerns to actions. And then for this part, I will try to be more positive. I'd like to quickly go back to what Mirova is, which probably gives me the honor of being here today. Mirova is an asset management company dedicated to sustainable investment within the Natixis group, which I created with a small team in 2014. What we did at that time is that we brought together the group's sustainable investment and extra financial research expertise to create an independent entity, pioneering in its approach, innovative in its vision of investment, 100% committed to impact investing. What we wanted to do is to prove that it was possible to reconcile financial performance with environmental and social impact, whatever the asset class, whatever the type of investor. At that time, impact investing and responsible investing was mainly a kind of niche within the big financial market, only a couple of percent of all the investments. And it was not clear whether it was possible to get at the same time responsible investments and performance, and to know whether we will have to choose be, between performance and responsibility. I know that there are many venture capitalists here today. So to say it in other words that will speak to you, we wanted to create a proof of concept of sustainable investment in order to make it possible to scale up this approach a lot in the future. That's what we have made, I would say, these last year. So in 2014, at that time, it was before the COP21. Our project seemed to a lot of people, and even to us, a little bit crazy. The 7 years that have passed since have largely given us reason to believe in it. Today, Mirova manages 25 billion euros in very different asset classes, and has been able to participate in the development of very impactful solutions, such as, for example, sustainable thematic funds. We manage funds dedicated to environment, to employment, to climate, of course. We were one of the first to invest in the green bond market about 7-8 years ago, and now this market has really grown a lot and is really very important for the financing of green projects. We have invested in energy transition infrastructure through our renewable energy funds, where we have invested in a lot of different technologies, from solar to wind, biomass, biogas, hydro in Europe. And we have also started to invest in what we call natural capital, meaning we invest in sustainable agriculture, in forest and ocean conservation, especially in emerging countries. We have invested in a lot of different initiatives in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. And we think this is something which will grow a lot in the future. We have also started an impact private equity fund a couple of months before. So more broadly, it is true that our world has numerous concerns, among which climate change and natural resources depletion and growing inequalities are probably the biggest. But to be frank, I do not believe that concern is a powerful enough motor to trigger actions at the scale that we need today. I believe concern can bring only semi-measures and weak regulation, half attempts from cornered corporates and unconvincing political programs. I'm sorry if it seems a bit harsh, but it's really true. We did not create Mirova out of concern. We create Mirova out of trust and conviction. The conviction that solutions to sustainable developments already existed and or were in the course of being created, and that sustainable finance could be the tool to finance those new business models and transform the economy, thus benefiting from it. The trust that investors would see how sustainable investing was beneficial, not only to them, but to the communities and the environment and to the people around them, and that they will make that choice. If I don't believe concern can lead to a systemic change, I am deeply convinced that trust and conviction can. Sustainable finance is at the heart of this new model, as a finance that can bring back trust. Trust between investors and asset managers, trust between asset management companies and projects, companies, teams. With this trust, then we can start to act. As a conclusion, I would say that in recent years, we've won a battle to a certain extent to put sustainable investment at the top of all the agendas, from politicians to regulators to the head of the big companies. So what is left for us to do now, and how can the notion of impact can be central to the next step? This inevitably leads us to what I would call the elephant in the room, which is greenwashing, because greenwashing is a real issue. How can impact investing can differentiate itself from a practice of ESG integration that loses much of its force as it becomes more widespread and mainstream? This is a key question. From then on, regulation is an essential issue and an essential tool to set limits and to define frameworks, standards, labels, and so on. In this respect, 2021 brought meaningful changes in terms of regulation. And 2022 will continue, will bring even more new regulation, not only in Europe, but all over the world. Last March, if we stay in Europe, the SFDR regulation came into force, asking all the funds manager to label their fund according to their level of impact, meaning you can put it in what we call Article 6, there is no impact intended. Article 8, you have an integration of ESG analysis in the investment process, or Article 9, having as an objective to create impact. Of course, it will not surprise you if I tell you that all our funds are Mirova are labeled Article 9, and that's of course a very strong commitment for us in the market. Next year, another regulation, MiFID II, will also come into force and will require from financial advisor to ask their investors, their clients, about their social and environmental preferences regarding their investments. Considering the massive amount of non-invested savings today after the COVID crisis, bringing retail investors on board could really make a difference in transitioning the economy. So all these regulations are huge steps forward, steps that we have been advocating for years. So I'm very impatient to witness what's going to happen now in the next steps, in the next years. I'm not concerned at all, and I'm confident on the outcome. Thank you very much for listening to me.